Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Storm, and welcome to part 2 of Alien Attack. In this part of the project, we're actually going to work on the game logic and the programming for Alien Attack, so we can actually make it do stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Underneath, still within my body tag, underneath my HTML stuff, I want to create my script tag. And inside my script, I want to create some variables. I'm going to go over each of these variables and explain exactly what they do. So first of all, I have an alien x variable, and I'm setting that to 80. And what that does is it sets my alien's x value, meaning how far across the screen horizontally it is, to be set to 80. And then alien y is going to be set to 20, which is how far along the screen it is vertically is going to be set to 20. And then I have variables that hold the player guess x and the player guess y. Then I want to set a shot remaining variable that's going to hold how many shots I have available before the game is over and the alien actually invades Earth. I set a shots made variable that is going to hold the amount of shots I've actually made so far. And at the beginning of the game, that is going to be 0. And then I set a game state variable with an empty string so that I can update the player with how many shots they have remaining and so on and so forth as I'm going through the game. Okay. And then I have a game1 variable, which is a Boolean, which is going to be set to false because I haven't won the game yet. We will change this to true once the game is won. All right, now let's get into our game objects here. So we have our cannon, alien, and missile. These are all going to be set game objects based on their query selectors, just like we did in the last project, right? We're just basically tying these variables to the HTML elements that they need to be able to communicate with. And the same thing with our input and output fields here as well, because we have our input X, our input Y, and we have an output field here for our paragraph element. And we're going to just tie all those to the right HTML elements that we need. And the next thing we have here is a section for the button. And the button is going to be, just like last time, we're creating a new variable called button. We're tying it to the button object in the HTML. We're changing the cursor style to pointer. And then we're creating an event listener that will run this click handler method whenever we click the button. Okay, now let's get into our methods themselves. We have a couple methods. We have a render method, we have a click handler method, we have a play game method, and we have at the bottom, we have, where is it? An end game method, okay? Let's take a look at these methods individually as we go. All right, went too far. The render method. So this method is going to be super important because now that we're dealing with actual graphics in our game, we want to make sure we have a method that will update the graphics position every time we play, right? So every time we click that button, we want our render method to go through to actually send new values to our CSS to update where our elements are going to show up on the screen. So if we remember in our CSS, we had some positional values set to pixels. Let's go up here really quickly and look at that. So for example, my alien, the width of my alien is 20 pixels by 20 pixels, the width and height. But if we look here, we have top and left. And the top and left values are where this object is on the screen at any given time. So it's 20 pixels from the top and it's 80 pixels from the left. So when we go down to our render function again, we can see that what we're doing is we're updating the left of our alien to be our alien x plus pix plus px so that it works well with our CSS, right? So we can update the CSS value, the style left of the alien to move it on the screen when we want. And we're doing the same thing with a cannon. Now the cannon only has the left value because we only want to move it horizontally. We don't want our cannon moving up and down on the screen. And we're doing the same thing with our missile here. Okay, and so our render isn't actually going to be called until the end of the game play cycle, which we're going to get into in a minute. The next function we have is our click handler function. Now, the only reason this click handler function is here is so that it can call another function called play game. Now, that may not seem like it makes sense to you, and for this functionality, it probably doesn't. There's really no reason for us to create a method or a function that's only job is to call another function. But the reason why we do that is because if you want to expand this game so that you can add more functionality within the click handler, meaning you want to have things happen when you click the button, but before the game loop starts, then you can add it in here as well. So we click the button, the click handler method or function is called, which then in turn calls the play game function. So let's take a look at the play game function itself and see what this does. So the play game function has a couple things going on. First of all, we're going to update the amount of shots we have remaining. So we're going to subtract 1 from our shots remaining count. And then we're also going to update our shots made count by 1. So we're going to increase it by 1. And then we're going to set our game state to be equal to shots plus shots made plus remaining plus shots remaining. We're basically going to display, we're going to create a new variable called game state that's going to display as a string what we have going on in the game. Basically how many shots we've taken and how many shots we have left remaining. Then here we have our guess X and guess Y, and those are going to be pulled in from our input X and input Y fields on the screen. And we're parsing those to turn those into integers. And now we want to get into the logic to find out if our guess is inside the alien picture, essentially. So what we're going to do first is we're going to check to see if our guess X is greater than or equal to the alien X. Now what we're doing here is we're basically just looking at the screen itself. Let me pull this up. So let's say this alien X value, which is the horizontal value, let's say the alien X value right here is 150, right? We're going to check to see if our guess is greater than or equal to the 150, meaning it's in this area here. If it is, then we're going to move on with the next piece of logic, which is we're going to check our guess X to see if it's less than or equal to alien X plus 20. What that means is, so we already know that it's either here or over, here or over, right? So we're going to see if it's less than the alien X plus 20, meaning we're going to add 20 to alien X, and then we're going to see if our guess is in that range right there, which is basically the range of our alien. So the first piece of logic checks to see if our guess is anywhere in this area. And the second piece of logic checks to see if our guess is anywhere in this area, which is directly on top of our alien. Now what we need to do is we need to refine it so we can check to see if the Y value matches up as well. So we're going to do that right here. So inside that if statement, we're going to have a nesting if statement, meaning an if statement inside of another if statement, to do the same thing but for the Y value, to check to see if we have matched the Y value with our guess, or our guess has matched the Y value of the alien. If that's true, then the game has won. We've won the game, so we're going to set game 1 to true, and we're going to call the endgame method, or endgame function, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Now, if we haven't matched up on our X value at all, then we know that we haven't hit the alien. So then we're going to just say, hey, you missed, and then we're going to give them the game state. We're going to check to see if the shots remaining is less than 1. If it is, we're going to end the game. So if not, it's actually just going to allow us to play the game again. Basically, this is our game loop now. So if we missed, great, it's going to tell us you missed, and it's going to give us our game state update on that paragraph element. And then if our shots remaining is greater than 1, then it's not going to run the endgame method or endgame function, and we're basically going to go back to the top of the screen. But if the game is won, then we're going to go down here and we're going to say, oh, sorry, let me So the else is there. And now we're going to go down here to see if the game isn't won. Basically, if the game isn't won, meaning we haven't hit it, we haven't won the game. Now we need to actually update the alien's value. We need to update where the alien is on the screen because we don't want it to stay in the same spot over and over and over again. That would be super boring and the game would be easy to win. So what we want to do is we want to update the alien's x value by coming up with a random x value and a random number between 0 and 281. So that's going to allow us to push the alien around horizontally on the screen. Now the reason why it's 281 is because our screen is 300 pixels wide and our alien is 20 pixels wide. So we don't want to make it 300 because then our alien would be pushed off the edge of the screen and we wouldn't be able to see it. All right. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to increase the y value of the alien by 30 every time we play the game or every time we run the game loop. What that does is it pushes the alien down our screen by 30 every time. And if the alien reaches the bottom of the screen, then we've lost the game. And then at this point, at the very end of the game loop, we're going to render the new graphics onto the screen. So this is where we're going to call the render method here. And then we have a couple of console logs here. Basically, this is just telling us, so if we want to cheat as developers, we can look up the console. We can, let me show you how to do that. We can go here and we can inspect the console. And we can actually go console, and we would be able to see where the alien is in our console here. So we can actually test it out and make sure we're hitting it. We can get rid of those. We don't have to actually have these in our final code if you don't want, because you don't want to give your user an easy way to cheat. That's just a cheat for me while I'm testing the game to make sure the logic works. Okay, so now at the end of this play game function, this is our game loop. At the end of our game loop, we have our last function, which is the end game function. And the end game function basically just says if the game is won, basically we're calling the end game method either because we won or we lost. So if the game is won, then we're going to have we're going to change our output to say hit, you saved the Earth, and then it only took you the amount of shots you made plus shots, right? If you lost the game, then it's going to say you lost, the Earth has been invaded. So that's basically how the game loop works, right? And so we want to make sure that we write all this stuff out the right way, make sure you don't miss anything, make sure you include all the functions, test it out regularly as you're writing. Now, some of this isn't going to, there's going to be a large gap of time where you're not going to be able to really test it to see if it works because there's not a lot of endpoints in this game where you can test. But, go about this systematically. If you just start at the top here and start writing all the way down, you may end up, kind of getting lost. I would start by creating your variables, your game objects, your input and output fields, your button, all that stuff. And then I would probably go on next to creating your click handler and play game methods here. And then maybe go back and doing your render method and then your game over method down at the bottom, or your end game method at the bottom. However, whatever you choose to do, you could just go through it, in order. So let me scroll through it pretty slowly so you can see, the script from top to bottom. So we have our variables here. We have our game objects. We have our input and output fields here. We have our button here. Then we have our render function here. So this is our render function. Okay. Then we have our click handler function, which calls our play game method. And then we have the beginning of our play game method, where we update the shots remaining and shots made. We update the game state variable. We update the player guess. And then we have our logic here, where we check to see if our guess is on the same X value as our alien. And if it is, then we check to see if it's also on the same y. If it is, then we've won the game, and we call the endgame method. If it's not on the same x value, then we say it's a miss, and we check to see if the shots remaining is less than 1. If it is, then we end the game. If not, we move on down to here. To see if the game isn't won, then we're going to update the alien's position. It's x and it's y. And then we're going to call the render method so that our graphics will change places and orient themselves properly on the screen. And then we have our end game function that checks to see if the game was won. If it is, then we will give them a "you won the game, you saved the earth" message. And if not, then we're going to tell them that they lost and the earth was invaded by aliens. Okay, pretty simple stuff, but it is getting more complicated. So if you're lost about any of this stuff, if while you're writing it, you just can't figure out what you're doing wrong or whatever, just please let me know. I'm more than willing to come over and go over your code with you line by line to find the problems and help you out. But it is important that you learn how to troubleshoot your own stuff. So if you come to a point where you just added some new code and it's just not working, then comment that code out by just typing, you know, some things there and then running to see if, the stuff you commented out is the problem. And then once you've verified, you can go back and make changes and get rid of the comments and all that stuff. But start working on those troubleshooting techniques. Start working on, learning how to expand this and make it better than what I've made it. But at the end of this, you should have a fully functional, ready to play game that you can show off to friends and family. Uh, for the rest of the term, we are going to focus on making a text adventure game. And the difference between this project or this text adventure project and the other projects we've just done, such as the alien attack and the number guessing game, is I am going to tell you what I want, and I'm not exactly going to tell you how to do it. I'm just going to kind of give you an overall view of what the final project looks like, and you are going to fill in the gaps on your own. I'll help you a little bit. But that's it for me. I will see you next time. Thank you for paying attention.